Hi guys. So it's been such a long time. It's very hard to record anything with my toddlers and my 4-month-old, but I had to get on here to share with you my miracle birth. I successfully had a VBAC after 3 C-sections. I know some of you are excited to attempt something like this. This video, I'm going to share just the birth story portion. There are lots more details that I hope to share in follow-up videos, but if you have any questions, please jot them down in the comments. I would love to answer any of them. This labor, I started having contractions a week before I actually went into labor, so that was very confusing and also a little bit stressful. In previous births, whenever I had contractions, it meant the baby was coming. When the day finally came, I knew automatically that those were the real deal. And just in case you're wondering if they're practice or not, when they're real, you're going to know the difference. So I went into labor at about 3 p.m. one afternoon. I kind of just kept doing my usual routine. I knew not to kind of focus in on the contractions, but just, start preparing. I called my mother-in-law, I let my doula know, and just went about my day. So that evening, I labored into the night in my bedroom with my husband. I was throwing up, I was starting to do my breathing techniques. So basically things were getting pretty intense. By the morning, probably, maybe 6 or 7 a.m., my husband and I went ahead and head to the emergency room. Now, we actually did not have a doctor. They always say, oh, it's so important when you're attempting a VBAC after more than 1 C-section to find a supportive team. Well, unfortunately, that is not easy to do because the way things are set up, most doctors don't want to allow you to birth as you like. And we visited at least 4 doctors. Thankfully, we did have a doctor willing to do my prenatal care. But he said to me, hey, I'm going to remind you every visit that I'm not comfortable to deliver this baby. We were fine with that. We respected that. And we just decided to go into the emergency room. And I had my records printed out. I also had my birth plan, several copies, so that everyone would kind of be on the same page and know the kind of birth that we wanted. Well, as I was being checked in, the doctor comes in and she says, okay, Susan, so I've looked at your history. I see that you've had 3 C-sections. So you're here for a C-section, right? And I said, no, I'm not here for a C-section. I'm here for a vaginal birth. I'm going to have a VBAC. And she said, wait, who's your doctor? She asked if he was on board and we're like, nope. And she went on from there to talk for at least 20 minutes about all the risk and why I shouldn't do it. And at some point, this got really frustrating and discouraging. And I just started praying, just out of nowhere. And my husband said he was even surprised, like, what's going on here? And he said, he saw the doctor and she kind of tilted her head forward a little bit while I was praying. When I showed up to the hospital, I was already 6 centimeters and 70% effaced. I had never shown up and been that far along before. Every time in the past that I'd shown up to the hospital, I was 4 centimeters. That was the most I had ever got along. So that was encouraging. But I just wanted to get to my labor room and relax. So I told her, you're not going to change my mind. And then she said, well, we have to have the anesthesiologist come in to talk to you about the risk of having a larger baby. So he came in and said, well, if we have to put you to sleep, your baby will be put to sleep. You could die, you could both die. I know this is their job. They had to give me the risk. I did tell the doctor at some point, hey, you sat here for 20 minutes talking to me about all the risks of attempting a VBAC. Can you talk to me a little bit about the risk of having a 4th C-section? Because there are risks. And those risks are higher than the risk of me having a uterine rupture from attempting a VBAC. And she gave maybe 2 or 3 sentences. I'm not kidding. She gave 2 or 3 sentences. Well, this could happen, this could happen. And then she kind of moved on. I told her, I said, you have your opinion and I respect that. And this is my body. So ultimately, I want to do what I want to do. I'm not going to blame you for the outcome. And whatever happens to me is in God's hands. So just let me go and labor. She even came in a little bit later and said, oh, actually, I'm not even so concerned about you attempting the VBAC. I'm actually concerned because your baby is larger. And my baby was larger. He was almost 11 pounds when he was born. And she was saying he was estimating to be at least 10 pounds. So I thought there was some, reason for concern there. But either way, I still wanted to push forward. I knew women who have had 10-pound babies before. I believe that God made our bodies to to birth the baby, whatever the size. And finally, they allowed me to go into the birth room, and I was thrilled. They actually left me alone after that. Praise God. No one came in saying, hey, can we break your water to get things moving along? The baby was doing great. The baby wasn't having any heart decels, which my babies in the past had every birth. At one point, though, there was a nurse that was negative about me making it to birth my baby. I was really in the thick of it. My contractions were about a minute apart, and I was so exhausted that I was actually falling asleep for that 1 minute in between each contraction. So when I opened my eyes, the nurse was sitting there. I was laying sideways. She was right in my face, and she said to me, "Sweetie, you're exhausted. I know you don't want to take the pain medicine, but you're just going to wear yourself out. You should really consider it." I don't remember if I responded to her or not. I may have said no. I may have shaken my head, but the contraction was boom, right there again. So I was just taking that deep breath in and moaning it out. I remember falling asleep again. And when I opened my eyes, the doula was sitting there in that same spot. And she looked at me and said, "Don't listen to her. You're doing great. You're going to do this." And that was obviously very encouraging. I did not feel tempted when the nurse said, that I should take the pain medicine. I didn't feel tempted at all, which is a miracle. And I really believed that God was with me. And I just had great faith. Praise God. It was really supernatural. And I started feeling my body push. And it was doing it involuntarily. So I started shouting, "My body's pushing, I'm pushing." And they said, "Don't push, we've got to check you, don't push." But my contractions at that point started coming back to back. Like they were not giving me a minute break anymore. It was kind of like they were peaking up and then they were coming down, but not quite all the way down, and then just hiking right back up again. My husband even said at that point, he started praying, like, we've come this far, and it was very hard. The doctor at that point said, "Well, I've got to check you. Your contractions aren't giving you a break, but I got to check you during a contraction." And I was like, no, because, you don't want to be touched when you're in that kind of pain. And she checked me, and I was a 10. I was a 10 centimeter. And that nurse that was negative, she was actually standing on the side when I was saying, I gotta push. And she was actually shaking her head. She was like, "No, she's not there. Oh, she doesn't need to push." And I did. I did need to push. I started, obviously the pushing phase, which was like so confusing for me. It was such a new thing. This was my 4th child, and I had never done the pushing before, but the doula was super, super helpful, because every time I would push and it was a good push, she was kind of like, "That's it. That's the one. And so her telling me that made me feel like, oh, okay, I have to do it like that. And I would, focus on that. Also, my husband was a huge help, because there were like 15, 20 people in the room. It was like, this is a big baby. This is a VBAC after 3 C-sections. And I had all these people shouting out different instructions. You got to pull your legs back. You got to wait until you take a breath. You got to wait for your contraction. And it was just chaos. And no one was listening to me, which is sad. My husband, he heard like that I was saying, "I don't know when I'm having a contraction." And so he kept telling me when I was having a contraction so that I could know when to push. At some point, I just looked up and I said out loud, "God, let this be the push." And I just gave everything I had. One of my friends, she said to me, "When you're in labor, you need to think about being a warrior. Don't think, think, like a warrior, And that was so helpful, because I actually did that in that moment. And they were shouting, take a breath. And I took maybe like a quick breath, but I had to keep it going. I'm like, this baby's coming out. And we got our beautiful baby boy. And it was such a huge miracle. It was such a big blessing. I couldn't have been more grateful that God granted that to me. And I had attempted it already 3 times. If you would like to have a vaginal birth after 1, 2, 3 C-sections, this is not medical advice, but it is possible. And the statistics are not high for the risks. In fact, it's more risky each time you have a C-section. And it's always better to do things God's way. But I just wanted to get my story out there to you. And I pray that this encouraged you as it has encouraged me. And God bless you. Take care.